brutal, terrible stories. But there were other apartheid-era violations that were equally damaging. Forced removals, homelessness, inadequate healthcare, extreme poverty, and racist, inferior education for our children. Today, close to 10 million South Africans can hardly read or write. A legacy of the past that many want the Truth Commission to investigate.
When I think back on all the crap I learned in high school, it's a wonder I can think at all. And my lack of education hasn't hurt me none. I can read the writing on the wall.
The 1953 Bantu Education Act. Separate schools and curricula for white and black. Inferior education for black communities.
And bitter debates.
It began with the National Party's rise to power and the policies of this man, Dr. Hendrik F. Verwoerd, the architect of apartheid. He was determined to deny black people, particularly the African majority, the right to quality education. In 1954, Verwoerd told the Senate that it was a waste of time to teach mathematics to a Bantu child. His Bantu Education Act had decided that black people would be trained to be no more than hewers of wood and drawers of water. The government trained black teachers in line with apartheid ideology, Christian national education. Government spending was unequal and racist. During Verwoerd's day, 17 rand for an African child, 40 rands for a colored child, 40 rands for an Indian child, 128 rands for a white child. For decades, students were forced to learn in Afrikaans and fed inferior education. The turning point came in 1976. Students revolted against the use of Afrikaans in their schools. Police crushed the June 16th demonstration in Soweto, leaving 23 dead and more than 200 injured. But schools and campuses around the country became battlegrounds. More than 15,000 children were detained between 1985 and the mass defiance campaign of 1989. During the late 80s, liberation movements encouraged students to become the main players in their people's war. Liberation before education became this generation's battle cry. Apartheid education and wide-scale resistance to it steadily eroded the culture of learning.
Teach your children well. Their father's hell did slowly go by.
So by the 80s, by the post-76 period, when the resistance emerged, that resistance, 1976, 1980, 1982, 83, 1985, highlighted the plight of education being one of the most critical features of how apartheid dominated the oppressed in the country.
In November last year, the National Literacy Cooperation and other education stakeholders asked the TRC to investigate the past education system. They argue that racist education was a violation of a basic human right.
I think the Truth Commission, even though its brief is narrow with respect to the experiences of activists and the maiming and killing that is spoken about in the hearings, we wanted the Truth Commission to broaden its perspective around whether socioeconomic rights or education rights that we want to see for the future could be given a kickstart.
We certainly don't have a mandate to make any impact on the educational system or the absence of a proper educational system. We simply don't have the mandate or the finance to do that, obviously, other than to draw attention to it and to include that sort of material in our report to the government in March next year.
Tom Letsowinia is a respected community leader in Tomahole near Parys in the Free State. He survived Bantu education, student politics during the 70s and 80s, as well as torture by the police. This week he told his story to the TRC's Human Rights Violations Committee. But he'd like to see the Truth Commission do more than simply record the experiences of black youth.
I would love if the TRC can budget time and money and the resources to empower that generation. That generation must be taught inter alia the managerial skills. The scientific field, they must go there. The technological field. I want to see the TRC focusing on that, the so-called lost generation.
It's very difficult for us to make any impact on that lost generation, as it were, other than to include the stories and the contextual material in our report.
Even with F.W. de Klerk's reforms, education was still racially divided. The National Party continued to spend more and more per rand on white education. By 1989, 2,900 rands on every white child and 650 on a black child. Fourie would like to see him explain his government's education policy to the TRC.
We've been trying to bring Vlok forward or of Malan forward about Vlakplaas and about a range of different specific killings. But one of the most damning effects of education was the apartheid regime, P.W. Botha, F.W. de Klerk, specifically not allowing people to be educated. And by disabling and robbing people of that, de Klerk must come forward and actually say, why did we do this? And we really feel that if it is possible to have a hearing, just one single hearing around violation of education rights, it will really highlight the plight of what apartheid did in structural terms to the population.
When will they ever learn? When will